Hi everyone, in this video we are going to discuss greenhouse gases. So before we dive deep into it, let's review. So a greenhouse gas is simply a gas in our atmosphere, so an ATM gas, that absorbs and emits, it must do both, IR radiation. Okay, it must absorb and emit infrared radiation. Now there are several of these that I expect you to memorize, so let's review. CO2, methane, water, nitrous oxide, ozone, and CFCs. Now 4 of these, the 4 in the middle right here, are considered natural. We have natural cycles where we create and break them down in our environment. So water is a classic example. We know how our water cycle works. There's a nitrogen cycle as well. We've also discussed how we can make and create ozone, but these all exist naturally. Now CFCs and CO2 also have a little bit of human influences, but we have a specific word we like to use when we discuss this. So for CO2 and CFCs, we say they have anthropogenic influences. So in other words, they have human influences, but you need to be super comfortable with that word. So let's talk about these individually. So CFCs we've discussed before. They are chlorofluorocarbons, and we know that they are 100% man-made. They do not exist in nature naturally. The only reason they exist is because a chemist or a scientist actually went into a lab, mixed things together, and created CFCs. Now, CO2 actually has a little bit of each aspect. There are some human influences and some natural influences. But before I move on, let's do a quick review. Please name CO2 in a scientific name. Go. Okay, did we get it? Hopefully you said carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is absolutely the correct name. You need to be able to name all of these greenhouse gases, know the name, know the formula, and I'd be able to write it out and spell it all properly. All right, so let's talk about CO2. The first thing I want to do is discuss the natural causes of CO2. And so a few of these will be quite obvious for you. First one, humans breathe. Okay, so when we breathe in oxygen, and we breathe out carbon dioxide. So immediately, we are constantly producing carbon dioxide and putting it out into the atmosphere. Luckily for us, we have plants that perform photosynthesis. And so what they do is they actually take that carbon dioxide and they convert it back into oxygen for us. So that is great. We have this beautiful cycle. So humans and plants, we need each other, we depend on each other, and it's absolutely gorgeous. All right, now a second cause of carbon dioxide is actually from volcanic eruptions. So when we have a volcano that explodes or erupts, it is putting in millions of tons, so millions of tons of carbon dioxide into our atmosphere, among other gases. I mean, it's not just putting carbon dioxide in there. There's ash, there's soot, there's a ton of other nasty stuff, but they are putting millions of tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere every single time it erupts. All right, so now, how do we get rid of it? One way is that we can dissolve carbon dioxide into oceans. And so this is done a lot of times by human processes, but it also occurs naturally, so we need to consider this. And then the fourth thing we talk about is that we can also incorporate carbon dioxide into limestone. And so what's really neat is that when carbon dioxide interacts with certain metals like calcium, they can come together and form things like calcium carbonate, and they interact with our limestone and it dissolves until we remove the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So these bottom two aren't super common, but they do occur naturally, but they also occur a little bit more easily when we have a little bit of human influence. But the big thing we need to talk about for carbon dioxide in terms of its relation in our atmosphere, how it got into our atmosphere, is if we talk about the 1750s and more importantly, the Industrial Revolution. Now, the Industrial Revolution was fantastic. I mean, it was great for us, but it was also really bad for our planet. And the reason is we started learning that we can burn fossil fuels and emit energy. Okay, so maybe to create energy. I don't really like using the phrase create because it goes against our first law of thermodynamics, but we release energy into the atmosphere is how I would like to say that. And then, but specifically, when we're talking about burning fossil fuels, we would say this is called a combustion reaction. So we started performing a number of combustion reactions. And so just to review what that is you take some source of fuel, you treat it with oxygen, and you create carbon dioxide and water. water, and you also create heat, okay? And so this is where that energy comes from, but we'll talk about all about that in another unit. But what we need to focus on right now is, and whenever we have a combustion reaction or whenever we have a fire, we are creating carbon dioxide and we're releasing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So although the Industrial Revolution was wonderful for our country, it was really, really bad for our environment. So I'm going to leave you on that note. Take care of yourself, and just think about what happens every time you set something on fire. Have a good one, guys.